A new supreme leader in Iran, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, replaces his assassinated father. His selection sends a defiant message to the US and Israel as they attack the country. So who is Iran's new leader and what does his appointment mean? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. Iran has a new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, coming out on top of the Islamic Republic's complex process to pick the most powerful man in the country. He takes over from his late father, Ali Khamenei, assassinated on the first night of the US and Israel's attacks, which also killed his wife, son, mother and sister. The new leader did not hold any formal position until now, but was a figure of major influence behind the scenes with strong support within the crucial pillars of state. His elevation is a defiant rejection of US President Donald Trump's demand that he approve whoever the next leader would be. Both Israel and the US have threatened to pursue whoever comes into this role. So what does his selection mean for Iran and for the conflict with the US and Israel? And will it bring any change in Iran's strategy, including attacks on other countries? We'll speak to our guest shortly, but first, this report from Imran Ullah Khan.
This is the moment Mojtaba Khamenei, the 56-year-old son of Iran's late supreme leader, is announced as the country's new leader. For most Iranians, Mojtaba's story begins at the age of 17, when he went to the front lines during the Iran-Iraq War, while his father served as Iran's president. The troops he fought with would later form what became the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, now Iran's most powerful military institution. Mojtaba Khamenei has long been seen as the influential figure behind the scenes, playing a role in the appointment of senior officials and shaping Iran's security institutions through his father's office. In the days leading up to his selection, US President Donald Trump warned that Mojtaba's rise would be unacceptable to Washington. But many in Iran's political and military establishment saw those remarks as interference, further strengthening support for his appointment. Those familiar with Mojtaba Khamenei describe him as even less flexible than his father. Mojtaba's father, mother, sister, wife, son, and several other relatives were recently killed in strikes by US and Israeli forces. Many believe this loss could shape his outlook and possibly push Iran towards a more confrontational path. But some analysts argue the opposite may happen. Under heavy pressure from war and international isolation, they say the government now faces two difficult choices: collapse or transform. Because Mojtaba carries the legacy of his father and the revolutionary establishment, they argue he may have the legitimacy to push difficult reforms without being accused of betraying the revolution. But time may not be on his side. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to target any successor to Iran's assassinated supreme leader. But the challenge goes beyond external threats. Many in Iran see his appointment as dynastic, arguing that the revolution which toppled a monarchy has now produced another. Under Iran's constitution, Mojtaba Khamenei is both the country's highest political authority and the supreme religious leader for millions of Shias in Iran and beyond. Whether he can unite the country and the war and reopen Iran to the world, or lead it into deeper confrontation and isolation, may define the future of the Islamic Republic. Imran Ullah Khan, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Okay, let's bring in our guest now in Tehran. Hassan Ahmadian is an associate professor at the University of Tehran. In Doha, Mehran Kamrava, professor at Georgetown University in Qatar. He's also a director of the Iranian Studies Unit at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. And in Washington, D.C., Alex Vatanka, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thanks so much for being with us here on Inside Story. We really do appreciate your time. Hassan, if I can begin with you first. You're in Tehran. Can you just give us an idea of how his appointment's actually been received by everyday Iranians? Obviously, there are many social divisions within the country, but what have they been saying to his appointment?
Well, the reactions that we've seen are people cheering up in the streets, filmed by Iranian state media, as expected in a society that has different opinions. And there were divisions before this, and the war brought them to a halt. But yet there are different opinions on how he is received. I think the fact that his entire family was murdered by the American and Israeli attack in the beginning of the war increased his public appeal. I think the Assembly of Experts chose a strong leader to lead the country, not to be led by its institutions. And that was one of the criteria they, I think, focused on choosing him to lead the country. And that, I think, will have an effect on his public appeal as well. He has pretty much all the credentials that a supreme leader, according to the Iranian constitution, should have, basically. And so I think that adds to his appeal in the public. But of course, there will be, and there are some who are critical. There are different factions in Iran's internal politics, as you know, who might prefer different candidates to lead the country. But at this point, the Assembly of Experts indirectly is choosing the supreme leader on behalf of the people who chose the Assembly of Experts. And so they have the mandate to do it. And the assembly is basically designed in such a way to be the most immune institute within Iran to internal and external influence. And I think that played to Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei's favor.
Okay, Mehran, this was a man who really appears in public. There is an unknown quality about him. How much influence did he already have inside the system, and what do you make of his appointment?
Well, as you mentioned, we know very little about him, at least in the public domain. But we do know that he was extremely active in his father's office. He was involved in some of the most important decisions of the state, particularly over the last decade or so, when his father became intimately involved in the day-to-day running of the state. And we know that he's got connections throughout the Iranian deep state, particularly within the radio and television network, in the Revolutionary Guards, among the Iranian parliament called the Majlis. And so he has been someone who has been involved, not necessarily in the public domain, but from behind the scenes. He's been actively involved in the running of the state, and he knows how a very complex political system like the Iranian system operates and functions. And so obviously at a time when the system is confronting a serious existential crisis, it wants continuity. It wants somebody who knows the ropes and how the system operates. And apparently, according to internal calculations, Mojtaba Khamenei appears to be the right man for the right time.
Alex, is that how you see things at this point as well? And what message do you think that this sends to the likes of the United States and Israel?
Tom, I think here in Washington, clearly, the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei is going to be seen as a rejection of President Trump's sort of call for, let's see if we can work something out, if you will. I mean, the president had made that clear. He was trying to insert himself into that Iranian policymaking process. We heard from Foreign Minister IRGC saying over the weekend that's never going to happen. This is an internal Iranian affair. But the American president is so preoccupied with optics. I don't know why he wanted himself inserted in that decision making. But here we are. Mojtaba Khamenei is the new Iranian supreme leader. A couple of quick points I point out, Tom. Look, Iranians by and large, and I think that's the reading here in the United States, don't know much about Mojtaba Khamenei. He's 56 years old. There are a couple of videos about him out there. We don't know even this, the sound of his voice. We don't know if he's a good speaker. His father spent 8 years as president. The people of Iran knew him before he became supreme leader. Mojtaba Khamenei is essentially behind the scene operator. And he's seen to be much closer to the intelligence services services than, say, the clerical establishment. So his religious credentials is not what's going to, propel him forward. And in that sense, in many ways, basically, I think here in Washington, Mojtaba Khamenei is seen as the symbolic figure now who will keep the theocracy in place. But essentially, it's the IRGCs, the Revolutionary Guards, is now running the show more than ever before. And that raises some interesting questions for Donald Trump, because if he wanted to avoid dealing with the IRGC, he can't do that anymore. And then final point, Trump, Ali Khamenei took a number of years to essentially, work himself into that role when he became supreme leader at the age of 49 back in 89. His son will have the same. He will need a number of years to find a way, if he can find a way, to work himself into that role. And the big question is, to Mehran's point, does he want to be a micromanager like his father, or does he want to decide to maybe be more of a religious, symbolic figurehead and let the rest of the regime deal with the many challenges that the country's facing?
Hassan, if I can come to you now, I guess essentially, will he have the same clout as his father, and how much time do you think that the Iranian people will give him to find his feet in the role?
I think he already does to a large extent, specifically because of what Mehran said earlier. He was, in his father's office managing many of the files that his father was managing. He has been an Ayatollah for 10 plus years now. Teaching as an Ayatollah at the seminary. He has very good connections with different state institutes, as we hear, including, of course, military and security apparatuses, but also different factions within the country. I think, as I said, they chose a strong leader. They chose a strong leader to fill the vacuum that the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei left the country in. And I think it won't be that long for him to showcase that strength and his capability to consolidate the system and the political system in a way that no vacuum is left at all in the system.
Mehran, the Islamic Republic was actually created to oppose hereditary rule, and yet he's obviously taking over from his father. So does this really go against the principles of the Islamic Republic, and what impact is that going to have, do you think?
This is an important point that you raise, and I think it's going to take a couple of decades to really figure out the consequences of what has just happened theologically, in terms of the theological evolution and development of Shiism. Because, as you mentioned, the Islamic Republic was anti-monarchical. But also, let's remember that Shiism theologically has had a strand within it that has been strongly family-oriented in terms of succession, the line of succession passing within the family of various Shia imams and Shia ulama. So it would be interesting to see how in the years ahead, if the Islamic Republic lasts a few years, it would be interesting to see how there are theological justifications and innovations to explain what has just transpired. At least in the immediate run, what we're seeing is that Shia theology has been almost completely set aside for the sake of political expedience in Iran.
Alex, his father had actually said long before this war started, my son will not succeed me. And many said that he was one of the least likely to actually be selected had his father died of natural causes. So what does that tell us about the message here to the rest of the world?
Look, I think the message the rest of the world for now need to take is, if you want to look at the Islamic Republic as an Islamist system with different factions in it, some on the softer side, some on the hardline side, more ideological. Inside of Iran, they refer to him as the technocrat versus the hardliners. It's the technocrats right now that obviously are going to be wondering what's going to happen to them. Because, at least on paper, President Masoud Pezeshkian, the administration, the presidential office, they lean on the technocratic side. For example, we know a few days ago when President Pezeshkian made that video telling the regional neighbors that, we're sorry, we apologize for some of these attacks on our neighbors. Quickly, he had to walk that back because the hardline ideological quickly said to him, no, that's not what we're going to do, at least not right now. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see Because right now, the hardliners, these are the men with the missiles, with the drones, with the military capacity. They are in the driver's seat, but they don't actually have a long-term solution to Iran's many, many problems. They don't. The only way of looking at the world is through resistance. And that's been the approach that has resulted in losing essentially the Iranian people and creating the conditions where they're at this war being attacked by the United States and Israel. So, going forward, it's not so much whether Mojtaba Khamenei one morning is going to wake up and decide, I'm going to walk a different direction than my father. It's more the question that will there be a consensus in the Revolutionary Guards and the other sort of deep state elements to say, we can't continue being on this path anymore. If there's one way this regime can survive, it's to make a fundamental break with the past and go in a different direction. And again, Mojtaba Khamenei would not be the architect of that. He'll be the face of it. But in the short term, I don't think he's got the political power to be able to be the architect of it. But he could be the public face of it going forward. And we just have to wait and see what the IRGC leaders decide what's best for them, their interests, and whether they, in terms of survival of the regime.
Okay, Hassan, what's your take on that? I mean, we saw very mixed messages coming out of Iran's leaders over the last few days, with Mr. Pezeshkian having to walk back some comments after he apologised to the Gulf states for attacking them. Do you think that the new Supreme Leader is actually going to be able to, I guess, bring everyone together and have a unified voice when it comes to the messaging that it's trying to send to the rest of the world?
I think the mere fact that the Assembly of Experts gathered to choose a Supreme Leader is because they felt that the Council of Leadership is not enough to fill the gap in times of crisis that Iran is in. Otherwise, there were risks for them to convene and elect the Supreme Leader. But they took it because I think the need for a single leader who can be strong enough to lead the country in times of peril like this one was in their minds, and they went for it. So he would have a final say. The minute he was elected Supreme Leader, he has the final say on war and peace. And I think that will have a lot of influence on how things will go with regards to the war efforts. The main priority at this point for the Supreme Leader and also for the entirety of the system is how to manage the war efforts vis-a-vis the aggression the country is facing. Another priority, I think, will come after the war ends, a ceasefire maybe, that is economics. And he has been promoted by people familiar with him as an anti-corruption figure. Both the war, the management of war, and the anti-corruption campaign, if it unfolds, I think both will increase his popularity because these are things that many of the Iranians are unsatisfied with, right, especially the economics, and they want to see different management of the economic position. So I think he will push for change in the economics of the country once this war comes to a halt.
At this point in time, it seems like that is a long way off because, Mehran, if I can bring you in here, ever since he was elected, we've seen Iran's war efforts continue in the same path that it was on. Many Gulf states were attacked just hours after he was elected. Do you expect to see that to continue, that these attacks on the likes of Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia will go on unabated? And what message does that send to the Gulf countries?
Well, I don't expect, or I did not expect, the selection of a new supreme leader would necessarily foster changes in Iran's conduct of the war. But I think Hassan makes a very important point. One of the things we saw with Ali Khamenei over the last couple of years, several years in fact, was that he was simply incapable of modifying his positions. He was inflexible, and he often would harp on a position that he would not back out of. And I think a new leader, even if it's a leader from within the depths of the deep state, even if it's his son, gives Iran an opportunity to change course, to change course in a way that Ali Khamenei was either unwilling or unable to do. Now, the war is different. The conduct of the war has confronted the Islamic Republic with an existential crisis. And Iran is going to, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and the Iranian military, they're going to hit American targets or American allies and the United States and Israel whenever and however they can, or their abilities allow them to do. But I think one of the things we should expect is with the departure of Ali Khamenei, the question then becomes, is Mojtaba Khamenei able to change course on the ship that's the Islamic Republic, or is it a ship that has committed itself to irrevocable sinking? I think that's the important question.
Okay, Alex, but before we get to that, though, will he even be allowed to change course? Because we know that the Israel and US have already said that they were going to target and try and kill any new leader, regardless of who it was. So how under threat is he at this point in time? Because we've seen the US and Israel obviously be very effective in targeting Iranian leaders, whether they're political or military, through this war.
Yeah, I make a distinction. I think the American side is much more cautious and hesitant in terms of assassinating any foreign leader. The Israelis, obviously, they're in a different place. They've been doing this for a long time. They think this is the way that they're going to take the war of their enemies to them. So yeah, I mean, Mojtaba Khamenei would have all the reasons in the world to take precaution, because he will presumably be a target. But listen, this also, Tom, raises the bigger question of, if you are where I am in Washington, D.C., right now, the message coming from the White House is regime change at this level through military action alone is not likely. The Israelis are echoing the same thing. So if that's where you're at, just taking out Mojtaba Khamenei without really having a bigger political game, what do you achieve? I mean, what does that achieve? And that takes us to the fundamental issue of what is it the US and Israel want? We think, those of us who watch this space, the Israelis are very clear. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu for 40 years has wanted to end the Islamic Republic. So no surprises there. But we also know he doesn't have the capacity to go and by force change the regime in Iran. Israel, just a country of 9 million people, can't do that, which means can the Israelis bring Trump into this war in a bigger fashion, including the mention of boots on the ground? Again, that's a very tough challenge for Trump. I'm not just talking about the price of oil today or the anger that we're seeing in the Middle East from U.S. partners who are saying to President Trump, why did you start this war? But American public opinion, which as of today is still pretty much against this war. So that is really the key question. If the U.S. decides, I can invest, and I shouldn't say U.S., I should really say Trump decides, I can't invest in regime change for whatever it's worth. I am looking for change of regime behavior. Takes us again to Mehran's point. And again, not so much Mojtaba Khamenei, the man, but the leadership who brought him to this position. Can they come to an agreement that they need to change course? Because Ali Khamenei was not somebody who compromised. He really didn't compromise. If he had compromised, Iran would not be bombed today. I mean, his son and the people around his son have different calculations to make for their own survival, for the sake of their own survival and what's left of the country of Iran. This is not just about Islamic Republic. This is about the survival of Iran as one country.
Do you think that, Hassan, that he will be able to make that pivot, to make that calculation? Do you think and try and find some sort of, in the short to medium term, an off-ramp from the conflict?
I think he basically radiates change and continuity in the pillars of the Islamic Republic, but the most important of which is independence. But also him being from the second generation of the Islamic Republic, very close to folks from the second and third generation, familiar with new tech and high tech. It seems that's part of why, according to the Assembly of Experts, he was chosen. This also tells us that there are changes coming under his leadership. In fact, Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Khamenei, his father, have had this personal effect on the position of supreme leadership. And I think he won't be an exception. But when it comes to the conflict, I pretty much reflect what Kamran said. I think for him to go for a ceasefire at this point will be a losing battle within Iran's politics, but also when it comes to Iran's independence. A ceasefire at this point would mean 6 months from now or 8 months from now, the country will be attacked again. The aim for this military effort on the part of Iran against the aggression that was waged on the country is not only a ceasefire, but to make sure to inflict much pain that the others cannot attack Iran every now and then at will, but to make calculus, to think twice and thrice before attacking the country. That's why you hear from the Ali Larijani, the Supreme National Security Council, head of that council, and also the Speaker of the Parliament, who has a role in managing the war efforts. Both are, reflecting on this, that they attacked us, they imposed an immense cost on us, they killed our leader. We will take revenge from them, we will impose costs on them in the region so that they won't come again and attack us again. Right. That, I think, the line of thinking that the new supreme leader will come along with, because he's not, he used to be part of the member of the IRGC, but he's not a commander, and he would give the leading efforts of the war to those commanders, I think.
Mehran, if I can finish with you, I'm not going to get you to predict the outcome of the war, obviously, but can you just give us an idea of what you think he needs to do in the days and weeks ahead to ensure the stability in the short term, at least, of Iran?
Well, I think he is facing a very critical task. What we're seeing is that the Iranians, as Hassan just said, are counting on a prolonged war. And if he can show resilience, if Khamenei can show resilience of Iran and survival and continue to hit targets in Israel and American targets, if that can happen, I think that in itself is a symbolic victory, if not necessarily a military victory, that he can then take to the commanders of the Revolutionary Guards and say, fight on.
Thank you so much. We really do appreciate all your time, all your insight into this. We'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Hassan, Mehran and Alex, we really do appreciate it. Well, thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Tom McRae, and the entire team here in Doha, goodbye for now.